Thanks, everyone, and welcome to our final session for today. And I just want to say, so I'm Bill Rodriguez. I'm the CEO here at Find. And I just want to say it's really been a tremendous day. I've been in and out of other sessions around town, but from what I've seen and heard, we've had incredible response, a tremendous turnout. We've had a tech showcase, which is still up here. The remainders, whatever wasn't swiped by people who wanted to take it home with them, is still here. But a lot of good discussions around diagnostics and the role and the importance of the focus on diagnostics both here today and this week at the World Health Assembly. And I'm reminded, I grew up in the US, if you couldn't tell. And when I was a kid, there was these series of cartoons, and one of them I remember well was, it talked about how there's a Mother's Day and a Father's Day, but there's no Grandparents' Day. And then the response from the grandparents to the children asking about that said, well, every day is Grandparents' Day. Isn't that nice? And I thought, well, it's sort of the same with diagnostics. Every day is Diagnostics Day, but once in a while we actually need a dedicated day to talk about diagnostics. And I think this is probably the first one of its kind here in Geneva like this, especially happening during WHA. And so I think that's really part of what's a real inflection point and a milestone for all of us who work across global health in a variety of areas, but for whom diagnostics are a critical component that's been maybe underappreciated and underaddressed over the years. So it's not quite Grandparents' Day, but still a pretty important day for all of us. So it's true. Probably most of you have heard this over the course of the day, or you may know this, but this week is also FIND's 20th anniversary. We were founded at the World Health Assembly in 2003, so exactly 20 years ago. And we were founded because the recognition at the time of the need to address global health directly and the need to provide access to treatments and vaccines. There was also recognition that diagnostics are important. At the time, I think it wasn't clear just how important they are. And over the 20 years of FIND's history and the 20 years of the evolution of work in global health and all the agencies that we partner with that do this work, and many of you here in the room, that importance and that relevance and the foresight to create FIND 20 years ago is now that much more important and that much more critical. So it's really fitting that one of the key areas of focus this week at the World Health Assembly is on diagnostics, this historic resolution on diagnostics that we expect to be adopted very shortly, really is a milestone, and we're proud to be connected to that through our history with the World Health Assembly and our founding, and to be hosting this event here today. Just a brief word about FIND. Many of you know us. We've really historically worked on new product development, and many of the products working now are up here. Over the years, we've helped bring more than 20 new innovative products in diagnostics through validation, through WHO endorsement, through prequalification, and made available around the world. Mostly those have been in tuberculosis and malaria, trypanosomiasis and neglected tropical diseases, SARS-CoV-2, if you're familiar with that disease. And let me just highlight over the past year, we've played an even larger role, I think, in some of the work. So we've obviously been a lead agency in the response to COVID, and I'll talk about more about that later, and my colleague to my left will also talk about some of that work. We've worked directly in the past year in 58 countries through our partnerships and supported more than 300 organizations to deliver on their work in the part that includes diagnostic testing and the importance of testing. We continue to focus on clinical trials that evaluate new diagnostics and provide evidence. We're a collaborating center to the WHO, which means we have a special relationship with the evidence that our studies generate independently are fed directly into the guidelines development process through multiple departments at WHO across multiple disease areas. In last year, we enrolled 32,000 patients across the world in more than 70 trials. So we're quite active in that piece of the work. We've also done a lot more in making sure that there's equitable access to testing. And one of the big areas of focus, which you hear about a lot, not just for diagnostics, but for vaccines and therapeutics, are regional manufacturing centers for products. So we've been working for more than 2 years to support regional diagnostics manufacturing. Over last year, at least three diagnostics manufacturers in different parts of the world, in South America and Africa, in South Asia, brought high-quality diagnostics to market and through regulatory authorization where they didn't have that before for manufacturing. And we're extremely proud of that work, which I think is critical for the future of autonomy, regional autonomy, for security, and for better access for patients when products are produced where patients live and where the needs are the greatest. So that's a little bit just about FIND, and I just want to highlight that despite all the signs you see, despite all the work today, despite my team doing an amazing job, today's not actually about FIND. Really what today is about diagnostics in a larger sense. And we may have been one of the first organizations to understand the critical role of diagnostic testing for health and for surveillance. We may have been one of the first organizations to realize that if you don't test, you can't treat. If you don't look, you can't find, hence our name. And more importantly, I think, than if you don't look and if you don't test, is what happens if you can't test? What happens if you don't have the test? What happens if you don't have the right tools, the right platforms? What happens if you don't have the health workers, the training, the laboratory infrastructure, the data management systems, the linkages to care and treatment, the policies that support it, the resources to be able to do it? And that's actually, I think, the critical issue that we're addressing here today with this resolution and the work that FIND and all of our partners do. We've all learned, I think, over the past 3 years what it means if you can't test. We've all had that experience early in the pandemic and maybe throughout the pandemic, that if you can't test, not only does it affect you and your family and your community, but it actually can very quickly devolve to a catastrophe economically and socially at schools and at workplaces of epic proportions. We've all seen that over the course of the pandemic. Our first speaker today I'm going to introduce, and I think has been instrumental in highlighting that before COVID, it was already a catastrophe of epic proportions. That for 4 billion, my daughter's learning how to count in French, and she can get to 79, and she struggles with 80, right? She can't get to 80. She'll never learn to count to 4 billion. It's a massive number, but for 4 billion of the world's poorest people, the 4 billion who have the least access, who have the least voice, who have the least power, this catastrophe of where you can't test was already an epic crisis for them, for their families, for their communities, when they couldn't test for tuberculosis or cervical cancer or diabetes or Chagas disease. It already had a devastating impact on them that we maybe didn't realize until we were affected directly by a different virus that crossed borders and across the world. So I think that's really what today is about. It's not about FIND, it's about a broader issue around access. And I think we're fortunate to have some people here today who've been thinking about that for a long time. The resolution that we anticipate being adopted really came from the work of a lot of people, many in this room, many around the world, many of whom will go unnoticed as this begins to emerge as a new focus for the world. But I want to highlight the work of the Lancet Commission on Diagnostics. The Lancet Commission was set up before the pandemic, and then what happened during the pandemic just really highlighted these critical gaps in testing. And so we owe a great deal of thanks for the work that the Commission did to raise the profile of diagnostics and then to quietly and then more forcefully advocate for that report being not just a report, but leading to real change, which we're seeing here this week, today at this event, and this week with the resolution in front of the Assembly. So I'd like to acknowledge and welcome the chair of the Lancet Commission on Diagnostics, Professor Ken Fleming. We've become very close over the past year as we've worked together on some of these issues. And I'd like to hand it over to you, Ken, to talk about your views on the resolution and the Assembly and the Commission and its work.
Thanks very much. Well, it's a great pleasure to be here today. I'm going to say survival by chance. Just think about that. So yesterday, I was at a meeting, and the introduction was by a lady who said 5 months previously, she had had a routine first mammography. And it had shown something abnormal. So they said, we better look further. So they did an ultrasound. And the ultrasound said, this looks like cancer. So they did a needle biopsy, and pathology showed, yes, invasive breast cancer. Looked at the receptor status, looked at the molecular component, advice on guidance. She had her chemo, she had her radiotherapy. 5 months later, she's sitting in front of us, telling us this story in her own lips. But she also said, I was lucky. I lived in a high-income country. I was picked up way early. If I'd lived in a low-income country or another country, it would probably not have been picked up until well down the track. And probably I would have died of my breast cancer. Survival by chance. Just think about that. Is that what we really want from healthcare? Survival by chance? So jump back 16 years, a few years just after fine. I'm sitting in a room in Bangkok. Has anybody heard of Nick White here? Malaria doc? Actually, probably one of the most foremost malaria researchers and doctors in the world. And I'm asking him, oh, Nick, you're doing fantastic stuff. How can I help you? And he said, the 3 Ps. And I think, well, what is this? He said, I need physiology, I need pharmacology, and I need pathology. I'm a pathologist. So I said, oh, that's interesting. Why do you need pathology? He said, because there isn't any. I said, what do you mean? He said, there isn't any in these many countries. And I couldn't believe him. So I decided to look into this, and sure enough, in many places, the 4 billion, there is nothing. No access, or very, very little access. Survival by chance. So I decided to look into this, as I said, and then I looked, and I could find virtually no reference to diagnostics and its importance. And I thought, how can this be? And it turned out there's no resources being put in. The funders, the decision makers, weren't putting it in. And that's why I decided to try and do something about it. Jump forward 16 years. As you just said, diagnostics is everywhere today. And hopefully there'll be a resolution in whatever it is this afternoon. What a transformation. But it's only the start. Resolution is a piece of paper. So we need implementation. And to implement and fill the gap, it's a very large problem. It's a very complicated problem. There's lots of moving parts. There's lots of people involved in it. No one group is going to be able to do this themselves. And this leads me to the alliance. So one of the other recommendations of the Lancet Commission, not only about resolution, was there needs to be an international alliance of interested parties to try and address this. This is going to take 30 years. It needs a group that's going to provide long-term drive, leadership, vision, advocacy, and so on. And that's what the International Alliance of Diagnostics that we've been taking. And we had a couple of meetings this week in Geneva, which looked really, really positive at this alliance. People think it's a good idea and are willing to participate. So I'm going to finish by just saying, who's heard of the Lou Reed song, It's Just a Perfect Day? So for me, and I think back my 16 or whatever years, travel down this road, and I've got no background in this. I came completely from nowhere else. This is just a perfect day. So I'll leave with that, but I'll also leave with survival by chance. That cannot be right. So we can change this, but it might take a while, but if we work together, we can make this happen. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Ken. I didn't think I would ever say this, but quoting Lou Reed at this point really means it's Grandparents' Day. It's not, but it's the right quote. It has been a really perfect day, I think, for a lot of us who've been working on this for a while. I'm going to come back, and I think we'll have time for questions at the end because we're moving along pretty well. I'm going to come back to talk more about the Alliance in a second. One of the real impacts of COVID and what's happened over the past 3 years for FIND as an organization, but also for diagnostics, is that we've learned on the fly as a global community how to address the gap in diagnostics for one disease, for one condition, but we've also leveraged that to think about how do we strengthen the entire system for diagnostics. And really that happened through the ACT Accelerator. The work of the ACT Accelerator Diagnostics Pillar, which was co-led by FIND and the Global Fund and with WHO, really was a trial by fire to say there's this massive problem in diagnostics. We first don't have tests. Then the tests we have are really designed for high-income countries. They're laboratory-based PCR tests. We need rapid tests. Then once we had a rapid test, we needed self-tests. And despite an enormous amount of progress in the speed at which those tests were developed, which was unprecedented in diagnostics, the equity gaps that remained over the course of the pandemic and remain today, if we have another wave of COVID, there's massive equity gaps for self-testing and rapid testing that shouldn't be there. That said, the ACT Accelerated Diagnostics Pillar did a few things that I think we're going to model when we pull together a broader alliance on diagnostics that addresses these issues that go beyond COVID. The biggest one is probably the coordination. We're able to come together in a coordinated way, and FIND was able to help support and manage more than 50 organizations on a weekly basis. Emma would probably say more like a daily basis, where we were engaged with partners around the world on access to PCR, access to rapid tests, pricing negotiations, access to sequencing and variant detection, all of which are important lessons on how we coordinate globally. We learned a lot too that you can only do that so well if you keep it in Geneva. That really the biggest successes were when the countries led the effort and we responded to their needs, and that didn't happen early enough or often enough. And that lesson, as we've taken that to heart when we think through what the International Alliance for Diagnostics will look like soon, not in 30 years, but this year. And I won't go through the numbers. 200 million tests delivered, price reductions of 50% in some cases, tests available for $1, rapid tests available for $1 through global procurement mechanisms. All of those were real impacts for COVID, despite the challenges we had in making access equitable. I will say on a personal note, and for FIND, probably the best thing to come out of the ACT Accelerator is sitting to my left. That's Dr. Ayode Alakija, who halfway through ACTA's tenure joined the weekly meetings as our chair on Thursday nights as the special envoy to Dr. Tedros, to the DG on ACT-A. And she turned things around for us. I think we were moving a little too slowly, and she's, if you don't know her, you should and you will. She's a passionate advocate, not only for tests and testing, but for every kind of health product, vaccines and therapeutics, but more importantly, for people. And that's maybe where we needed some new attention midway through the pandemic, is to focus on the people who need these tools and making sure we get them. And so I'm proud that she came in and helped us see the light, and also that she joined FIND as the chair of our board of directors earlier this year. And so it's a great privilege and a great pleasure to have her working closely with us and to introduce her to speak to you here today. Yodi?
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. There's been lots of things said about the ACT Accelerator, but I'm blown away that I was the best thing to come out of it. From your perspective, I'm sure there are different perspectives on that. But thank you, just thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here as the chair of this incredible, the board of this incredible organization. But before I go any further into my talking points or my little, speech, I want to acknowledge those who have gone before me, and I want to acknowledge the board members, some of whom are here present today, and say that there's been so much work, Ilona, so many people, there's been so much work that has been done, there's been so many efforts that have been put into this, and today, as we mark this 20th year, and I said to Bill and to the team, I think we should, everybody who knows me, I'm wearing bling, right, knows that, let's make us flash, let's have a birthday, but we didn't want to overshadow Tedros and his 75th, because then it was Grandparents' Day, so that, So we figured that we would do a 21st instead. But as we say that, I would really like you all to join me in thanking the team, in thanking the board and those who came before, and the previous board chair and all the board members, as we sing Happy Birthday to Find. Happy birthday.
To you. Happy birthday to you.
Cake. To find. Happy birthday to you. And I think it's important. It's important to celebrate these moments. It's important, you know, when I joined the ACT Accelerator, it was all about vaccines. It was all about vaccines. All anybody would talk about was vaccines, you know. But we forgot the diagnostics are the very cornerstone of health, of universal health coverage, of primary health care, that we needed diagnostics. We forgot, I think one of the first meetings that I joined, or the first series of meetings, I was conspiring with Emma, I believe, on WhatsApp or something during that meeting. I hadn't even met her, but there was a conversation ongoing about what was the efficacy of various diagnostic tests. And I said, what is this? Who cares? Do we have diagnostics in communities? Are we not looking at access to diagnostics? Yes, the science is important, but we needed to bring it back to humanity and to reality. And so it's, I think, FIND and the work that you all have done, led by yourself, Bill, and this incredible team, hasn't gotten enough attention as we talk about preparedness going forward. And I look at my wonderful sisters at the back, and you know, from PAN, and you know, as we look at how we move forward into what may be coming next. I spoke yesterday, or I think it was the day before, the days are blurring into one, at the strategic roundtable on pandemic preparedness, and I reminded them that there's an urgency in this moment. I reminded them that the next pandemic could be upon us, but because we don't have diagnostics, because we don't have people testing in the barrios of South America, or in the slums of Nigeria, of Agege in Lagos, where I come from, or in Kibera in Kenya, or wherever you might choose to imagine, because we don't have this immediate point of care testing, because we're not looking, we're not finding, pun totally intended. And this work is critical and it's important, so I'm particularly excited today. I met His Excellency, Professor Fleming. I've promoted him to Vice President because the other day I asked if there was anyone in the room who would like to be Vice President. He said yes. So now we call him His Excellency. But the, yes, come on, woohoo! The incredibly important work of the Commission. And the countries that we saw unanimously on Sunday come together, so many ministers in that room. We had this side event that it was mind-blowing. There was ministers from Ghana, from Ethiopia, from Kenya, from Swatini, there were so many people in the room. There was a vice president from Zimbabwe who came and left. I mean, the commitment to this, a lot from Africa, because we understand where the shoe pinches. It is a person who wears a shoe who knows where the shoe pinches. And so for us, those ministers were very keen because they understand that they're but for the grace of God. The little story that Professor Fleming just told about, you know, diagnostics and breast cancer. We have lost too many people from too many diseases. Yes, SARS-CoV-2 was the trigger in this moment and is what we're talking about now. And yes, it is very much front of mind. But, you know, I think about cervical cancer and those that we've lost. And I think about tuberculosis and the thousands that continue to die every day. So we're incredibly thankful for everybody's work, but I want to particularly say that as this resolution, and hopefully they're voting on it now, oh my goodness, I was in that room earlier as they were voting on some resolution, and this shows the inequity of this moment that we're in and the fractured world that we're in, because there were so many abstentions, because everybody has lost trust in one another. And it was sad to see, and I hope we don't go that route, because diagnostics surely is not a contentious topic. But it provides a framework for countries to strengthen their diagnostics capacity and implement national health strategies to achieve health and economic impact. And so the all-important resolution can only increase our capacity and access, especially in low and low middle income countries. So now I come to my sister. I want to thank Eswatini. And I want to thank in particular this phenomenal woman whose name is almost phenomenal in its spelling because it's Philomena, phenomenal Philomena Similane, for your inspired commitment and leadership in negotiating this historic resolution. Thank you, my sister. Thank you. She did the incredible hard work. And often you will have ambassadors and ministers who will be the ones who sit forward, and too often they're men. But often it is a woman who is behind them, who is writing the notes, who is doing the hard work, and who is doing the hard graft. So it is only right that you be sitting here today. There's been incredible support from across the Africa Union bloc, from Bangladesh, from France, from Germany, from Indonesia as co-sponsors. I've thanked Professor Fleming already and Alexandra Humber Perry for her support to you and the member states throughout the process. And now it is my pleasure to hand phenomenal Philo the microphone. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. When everybody has spoken and has spoken so well, you tend to wonder what can you add to the narrative. For me, when I took the resolution, when Bill and Ken came to the office, I was a bit hesitant because I didn't even know what diagnostics was. And and they went out of their way to educate me, and I began to have an interest. Then I asked the Ministry of Health to assist me, and if they were interested in leading the resolution. They were a bit hesitant at that time. When I took the resolution to the Africa group, there were no countries that came forward. So in the end, I said to Bill, okay, it's either I'm going to jump. It's either I swim or I drown. And he said, no, we won't let you drown. Just swim and we'll be there with you. The resolution has been an eye-opener for me. I have learned a lot for my career individually and in the field of diagnostics, because as we were going along with the resolution, there was a colleague from South Africa, Lebo, who gave us a narrative about how her sister was diagnosed, but then unfortunately the machinery broke down and that delayed her diagnostics. So that spurred me on to say, no, this resolution is necessary. Let us push as much as possible. So on behalf of the group, I began engaging within the African Union. After I finished engaging with the African Union, then we moved further with other countries. And because of the political turmoil that the world is in right now, some countries could not co-sponsor the resolution at that time. However, the Ministry of Health insisted on asking one of the European countries, and luckily for us, Germany was more than willing to assist me, capacitate me, and help me lead the resolution. The resolution was not without its challenges, simply because we had 7 consultations, and the last one lasted until 11 p.m. And for us to argue on unhindered access and issues that were not really focused on diagnostics was a challenge, but we had to try and make the teams focused. And even though I realized that in the room I've got 2 completely different camps who have strong red lines, I had to make the decision in the end, and at least we have a resolution that is not bracketed. It is greened throughout. I know for some people would think that, oh, if only this was added into the resolution, but this was the initial draft. I hope the second one will have more input, your inputs as well, that will propel it to the next phase. But all in all, I'd like to say a huge thank you to Find, to Bill, and to the Lancet Commission and Ken for the wonderful work that they did to capacitate me, and to thank the German government for their assistance to Eswatini. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Philo. I just want to make 3 brief comments, and then I think we'll have some time for questions, SJ. Is that okay? So first, when I started my remarks earlier at the hour, I mentioned that there's a lot of unsung heroes who've been working in the field for a long time and have gotten us to this point today, a real milestone event, Diagnostics Day and the resolution. The hallmark of an unsung hero is Philo Meneslawana. You heard her story, but it just doesn't even touch how much she did and how much she lifted to get this resolution to the point where it was completely green-lined. Those of you know how hard that is in a WHA resolution, advocating going toe-to-toe with some significant political leaders who had a different agenda. And I think the fact that we got to this point, and hopefully we'll see at the end of the week that it's been adopted, is just a tremendous accomplishment, especially when you start with a story saying you didn't really even know if you could swim in this space, but you not only swam, you swam like a champion. And we are grateful. So as much as we're proud to have helped you, we're so grateful for your efforts and to get us here today. The second thing I'll say, and I don't think I'm speaking out of school, well, so there have been 2 sort of closed-door meetings that we've had with ministers and the representatives here in Geneva to the permanent missions who were responsible for the negotiations on the resolution over the past few weeks. Ken mentioned one of them, and Yodi mentioned one of them. And I'll say that at both of them, the unanimous support we've had for the importance of this resolution, the importance of diagnostics, not just for pandemics, but for primary health care, has been overwhelming. And the German representative said in one of those meetings with us, it's been an interesting process for me to co-sponsor the diagnostics resolution and for my government to co-sponsor it because multilateralism is broken. We're polarized. Every other resolution we're working on, there are going to be abstentions and fights and there's red lines and we can't work together. The world is polarized, except this one. He said, it's renewed my faith in multilateralism. He literally said that because we worked together, we had issues, we addressed them, and maybe the future of multilateralism is on pragmatic issues that we can work through and agree on. And diagnostics is going to be this is his words, going to be my model for how we do this in the future. And for those of us working in diagnostics where we used to have to explain what PCR meant, like what that was, it's really revealing to think that we're in a different place now than we were years ago. So that, and again, I honor Philo and Eswatini for the work they did to get to this point. The last thing I'll say, and then we'll turn to questions about the Alliance. So we've been working at FIND with the Lancet Commission and with a lot of global partners for a while in the background. We couldn't get ahead of the resolution. So we're working closely with WHO in anticipation of the resolution being adopted, working with WHA, with Africa CDC, with PAHO, with ministries from across Latin America, Africa, and Asia to begin to put some structure and shape to the Alliance. And the meeting Ken referenced and Yodi referenced on Sunday was really a tribute to their commitment. They ran up the hill from the assembly to a small closed room where we were just talking and meeting and beginning to informally talk about what are the next steps. And their passion and their advocacy and their commitment to supporting an alliance on diagnostics came through loud and clear. And I'll just say everyone who came to that Sunday event was from representing an LMIC ministry or cabinet. There were no donors in the room. Actually, a donor snuck in. We didn't realize until after the meeting that there was a donor. We're like, who is that? Oh, it's, okay. But there were no, the G7, the donor countries, bilateral agencies were not there. This was purely led from LMICs about what they want, what they need, how they want to see this governed and structured, and what their priorities are. And that to me is the future of this alliance. We're really going to try to do this in a way that honors their needs and their approach. And the next steps you'll begin to hear about, assuming the resolution goes through and is adopted, we'll begin to now publicly talk about the planning stages for the alliance and what the next steps are. And as we work closely with WHO to put some structure behind this, we expect to now announce later this year what that looks like. And again, the governance will come largely from our partners across ministries in low and middle income countries. So I'll stop there. We'll take a few minutes of questions maybe, and we can pass the working microphones around. and see if anyone's got questions or comments on anything across the day or about what you've heard today. And again, want to thank the panelists and Ken and Philo and Yodi for all their hard work. And we're just looking forward. This is a key event and a milestone, but it's the end of one journey and it's the start of a much longer journey. And we're looking forward to working with all of you in taking that journey together.
Who'd like to start?
I think everyone knows there's apéro waiting as soon as we stop, right? So, yeah.
Why are we doing questions?
Exactly.
It's a birthday party.
It is a party.
Well, if there's no burning questions, then
Yeah.
for sure everyone's going to be here, and we can have a conversation offline as well. So.
So yeah, I don't know, Esther, do you want to lead us to the event? I would just to say thank you for coming throughout the day. Thank you for your attention, and thank you for ongoing support for our work, your work, and our future partnership together as we move ahead after today's event and the resolution. And thanks for coming.